So here is my shop in what I would call a pretty average state. I think no matter how much I work on it, I am terrible at putting things away. If I really need a tool or like some kind of specialty material, I'll drive across town or even the state or even across half the country to get it. But what it turns out I absolutely cannot do on a day-to-day basis is pick up a tool from wherever it lives in the shop, use it for a singular task, and then put it away. Stuff just kind of starts growing on my workbenches. Even like certain components or materials. Like I got this box out to find one little tiny screw, and I couldn't put that box away. Over here, I've got some plumbing fittings. I only needed one fitting out of this box, but just somehow I'm physically incapable of then just closing this box and putting it back in its home. So in my shop, this is how things live. Any flat surface just starts to get filled up more and more, and eventually gets to a point where I just cannot continue to work with everything out. And then at that point, I go through kind of a mass cleaning. So that's sort of the theme of this video today, is that since I am unable to be good at cleaning, I jokingly call my shop organization first order returnability. Now I've drawn a lot of inspiration here obviously on Adam Savage's first order retrievability, and I really enjoy his just like general philosophy about always trying to improve your workspace to make it more enjoyable and more efficient, but knowing at the same time that things will never be perfect, and just that what is considered perfection is going to change over time. What you're working on is going to change, what tools you have is going to change, but it's just a lot of fun to kind of try to make this space as much what you want as possible. So with that, I'd like to go over my tool wall here today. Now there are several things I'd like to change about it that I'm going to point out along the way, but just knowing how stuff goes in the shop, I might get around to those things tomorrow or next week, or it might be 5 years from now before I finally have a chance to make some of these improvements. And a good place to start this tour through my tool wall I thought would be this little combination and double square rack I've got built here. Now when I originally built this, I didn't have the center woodpeckers unit. I just had two of these little mini 6-inch double squares, and then I had these two 1-foot combination squares. And since then I've started using this one you can set to specific angles quite a bit. Unfortunately, the only expansion I built in was for one extra unit, and at this point I just got to build another rack because I'd like that to not just be living on this countertop. But if you buy woodpeckers products like this one, I actually bought this one specifically because I wanted this double square. This lives in my shop apron, and these little mini double squares are my favorite kind of quick grab kind of layout tools. But if you buy these, they actually come with these little storage pieces so you can put them on your wall. These kind of make sense, this kind of slots in here essentially, and then it will hang up on your wall like that. And this woodpecker's red, I mean this stuff is probably $100 a square inch to have on your wall. So if you have a lot of it, like you want to show that off. You do not want to hold back on your woodpecker's red all over your tool wall. So, but if you think about it, with these two little storage racks they have, you have to have a little gap in the middle here so you can slot these in. But just to store these two on my wall with their little included racks would have taken up more room than I need for all 5 of my squares here together. So that's kind of a theme of all my tool storage. Is my shop is an old Quonset hut, so vertical wall space is a real premium. And for me, I just try to figure out what is the lowest profile yet still ergonomic way to grab this. So for me, even compared to these little woodpeckers things, here you got to kind of slot it in from the side, which is like not very natural, I think. To me, the natural thing to do is to just come along and just put all these in here straight up. So that's kind of a theme to how I've tried to think of how I've tried to design as much of my storage in my shop as possible. Sometimes that's worked out better than others, but this little rack, although it needs to be expanded, I think is just a good example of that. So besides this little storage rack here for the combination and the double squares, I've got these little Incra T-Rules. These are some of my favorites. If you haven't used these for laying things out, they're just great. They've got all these tiny little holes in them so you can mark them with pencils, you can run them along edges, so that's something I use all the time. Above that I built this little tape measure storage rack. Some of these are pretty nice. I like these flat back ones in certain applications. And then like this square finder one, so you can like make sure your drawer boxes are square. It's got that nice tip on it. I find that really handy as well. And then something I'd like to revise for the next version of this is I found out I've put a lot more rulers up here than I expected for all my little short mini rulers, but unfortunately when I first cut all the grooves into this out of walnut, oh, I got that wrong. The walnut immediately wanted to curl over, and it has won against the glue and it started to peel itself off. So in a future version of this, I think I'd like to kind of put this at an angle. So like if I want to get a ruler out of the back here, I can just kind of see it. I don't have to be like sorting like which one I want to find. I've got some French curve templates and then more like kind of router curve templates here, along with just some general plastic ones that I use a lot for kind of marking things and drafting things out. Up here I've got a carpenter square and a speed square storage. I really like this for how compact it came out. These speed squares just slot in the front here. I used to have at least one more, but I've lost those. And then all my carpenter squares, they just kind of slot in from the top like that. I don't use those nearly as much as some of these Incra ones, but it is nice to have those. Another thing I'd like to revise is I've only got 2 mounting points here for all my rules. So obviously the ruler I want is usually not the one on top. And as a result, I've got to figure out some way to kind of make these more accessible, but I don't want just a whole wall of individual rulers, because I think that's a waste of space. Up here, I've got my pocket hole jig. This probably could just go in a drawer somewhere. I hardly use pocket holes anymore, but it just kind of got it out of the way. I've got the jig, got screws, and then I've got a few different drill bits just set for different sizes. But anyways, that can go away. Paper towel holder, kind of lacked the foresight that I actually need to put these paper towels on and off. So now when it's time for a new roll, I kind of got to wrestle it on there. But nice to have paper towels. All the hammers I really use. This one has kind of been superseded by this nice kind of spalted mallet I made myself. So I sort of could get rid of that one, but otherwise I use those daily. And then just kind of all my glues, pore fillers, and such here. Some of the stuff I really like here is obviously this 3M adhesive remover, adhesive cleaner. I think is just a nice cocktail of all the different cancerous chemicals you can get together, but I think it's the best kind of cleaner for adhesives. Wood glues, some water, and then I've started to rely on CA glues more and more all the time. So I kind of think in like a future version of this, I would put a little front tray here so I could actually see all these short bottles individually, because inevitably I'm always trying to find which super glue I'm actually looking for in this current orientation. But this tray has been really nice, and without a bunch of legs or anything to it, it just is nice and out of the way. Then I've just got some silicone brushes and other kind of glue related things. Moving back the other way, I've got a little bit of chisels. These are supposed to be designated as my kind of glue cleaning only chisels, but as you can see, it seems like almost all my chisels have some schmutz on them, so I'm not very good about holding to that. I really like these crank neck chisels that I don't see many other people using, but I find like if you're cleaning up surfaces with this handle bent off the surface, it's just a lot nicer to work with. So I like these crank neck a lot, and then I just got some regular chisels in the back. Card scrapers, which the more I work on vans, the more and more these just become glue cleanup tools as well. This one's kind of supposed to be my specific glue cleaning one, and then some of this is actually just finger sweat from some kind of intense project. So unfortunately, maybe I should have waxed these or something first. But anyways, those get kind of neglected because I've just been building vans recently. And then again, woodworking only. The cabinet scraper just saves a lot of sanding time if you have a project that calls for it. Down here, I've got all my sandpaper. I've basically gone away from using sheet good sandpaper. I just like these rolls now. They have an adhesive back. This little cutting board lives down here, so if I need a square, I just take a little straight edge and I'll cut myself a corner off. And then this just has a nice adhesive back, so what I'll do is I'll either attach it to just some pieces of 2x4 if I want kind of a sanding block. Otherwise, what I often do is I just fold them over, and as you see, I use tons of these little pieces for just like random detail work. And this is close to overflowing here soon, so a lot of this will just kind of get cleared out to the trash, and then I'll start rebuilding my sandpaper scrap pile. I keep obviously a bunch of masking tape here too. That would be nice in a future iteration to have some kind of actual storage for, not just the pile effect. Moving up here, this is kind of a staple of my wall storage. I built this rack and now I just want to build another one. It's kind of the catch-all. Every time a new tool comes into my shop that I think might be functional, it finds a little home here. And then there's a few things that, as that's happened, have kind of outgrown it. You know, like my writing utensils down here at the bottom, that's always worked great. I really like how I can just, you know, these are all my 1.3 millimeter pencils, all my 0.8s, 0.5s. Sharpies, other random things. But then things like screwdrivers, you know, like I've got square drive here for these two. I've got Phillips, I've got straight, I've got a posi drive. This is actually a chisel, but these screwdrivers, there's just so many of them right now, especially with these little Allen hex key ones, that these things just need their own rack. I've also, in the last couple of years, really started to use more and more chisels, and I just, at this point, want to buy a few more chisels. But, you know, these super long chisels, they're only really in here because of kind of the cantilever against the back wall, which keeps them from falling out. So I kind of need to build a dedicated chisel rack. Like I've got 3 chisels here. I've got a couple of straight mill files there. Yeah, I'm calling these chisels. I've really started to use files a lot. And then I've got some half round files, round files, and then I've got some nicer wood specific files up here. So I really just need to build a specific file storage, just because with even how long these items are, it makes getting the things out between them kind of awkward. But so my file collection has grown to a point where they're ready to have their own home. But you know, like other things I always use is I love this little Starrett, just little scribe here. I use that all the time. You know, spring-loaded punches, I use those all the time. I've got these Baco carbide scrapers. They're kind of awkwardly shaped for this too. That needs its own home. Probably all my pliers and random cutters, along with all my scissors. You know, that's all stuff that's kind of, a number of items I have in those categories has gotten so huge that I should just build its own little storage rack. But as a whole, you know, like these, what is that, centering kind of punches, or what do they call this, alignment punch. You know, it would be silly to build its own storage rack for that. But as a whole, this just catches everything. I love this little rack. Moving on, I've got all my like pneumatic fasteners. This is kind of my staple 18 gauge brad nails. I use that probably 90% of the time. Then I've got a little 23 pin nailer, and then just some narrow crown staples, and then one of these super cheapo T50 nailers. But you know, I just like the way that rack is made. Obviously, if I got another pneumatic tool, I need to expand that, but you know, it's just easy access. It's easy for me to grab my tools, easy to put them away. This is all my brad nails and staples, along with some like T-nuts and threaded fasteners I use. So I like this little rack. I wish these things pulled out like shelves, because it's kind of annoying. You know, like if I want to get some brad nails, I got to pull this out, then I got to find a place to set it. So what ends up happening is as I explained, I just put this here, I grab the brad nails I need, and then this lives here. A while later, I come back, and for some reason, I'm physically incapable of putting things away, so this just sits on top of it. And then a week later, I have to go through a mass cleaning in the shop. But you know what? Here we go. Start with a good example. So anyways, I wish that was just on drawers, but it's fine for now. And then finally, we've got another catch-all rack here. This is stuff I use a little less often, but you know, clearly I use a lot of my grinding discs all the time. These like multi-tool sanding pads are a joke. I probably should just trash those. You know, Allen keys, which are really helpful for adjusting all sorts of like depth stops. Those live there, so I know they're right there. And then I kind of like these skinny little slots I built in. I didn't even realize how useful these would be, but I'd kind of like to build more of these so I could just house all my saws. Like if I could have another one right there, but unfortunately it's too tall. So this is just kind of a handy little zone. You know, Allen keys, torque spits, and that's sort of the second catch-all. It doesn't get used as much as this main one, but I'd like to have another rack. You know, it's just nice to know exactly where these items are instead of having them in some drawer where it just gets buried and then I can't find it when I need it. So that's my tool wall. So that's just a quick little overview of my tool wall here. You know, of course, I've got a little bit of free space, and I've got a few other things I'd like to add to it or kind of modify. You know, included in that, I've got 3 little planes here that I use on almost every project. And this is a little Veritas cabinet maker's plane for the kind of work I do. I just use that all the time. Got a little Bridge City guy I picked up on a Black Friday special that I'd like it to have a little home too. And then, you know, I got a little rabbiting block plane from Lee Nielsen. These 3 are like the planes I pick up the most for all the work I do. I've got a few other big planes, but you know, 98% of the time I reach for these. So it'd be nice to have a little home for them here as well as, you know, modifying some things like this ruler. So hopefully in the next little bit of time here, I'll have some free time actually to kind of go over some of these little shop improvement projects and cover those in a future video. So as always, thanks everybody so much for watching, and I hope you found something here interesting, or, you know, maybe even learned something. Thank you. Here's my friendly camera assistant. She's never this nice actually. Oh, he's giving me the bird.